Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover the hidden fortunes that might be sitting right in your pocket. And today, we're diving into a story so incredible, so mind-blowing, that you'll want to check every single penny you own after hearing this. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1965, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering $26 million? Yes, you heard that right. $26 million for a 1-cent coin that looks almost identical to any other penny you might find in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or even lying forgotten on the sidewalk. This isn't some fairy tale or exaggerated rumor whispered among coin collectors in dimly lit back rooms. This is real, documented, and absolutely achievable if you know what to look for. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this 1965 Lincoln penny so extraordinarily valuable, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore this incredible coin, I'm going to reveal 4 more pennies that are worth even more than this one, including one that could make you richer than you ever dreamed possible. And trust me when I say the values only get more shocking from here. The 1965 Lincoln penny sits at a fascinating crossroads in American numismatic history, a transitional year that would forever change the composition and character of American coinage, and it's precisely this transition that created the opportunity for errors, mistakes, and ultimately, treasures worth millions. You see, 1965 was the year immediately following one of the most significant changes in U.S. mint history, the elimination of silver from dimes and quarters due to the Coinage Act of 1964, and while pennies weren't made of silver, the upheaval at the mint, the pressure to produce coins quickly to meet public demand, and the installation of new equipment all created the perfect storm for errors to slip through quality control. The standard 1965 penny, like those produced since 1982, should be made of a copper-plated zinc composition, but here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where fortunes are made or lost based on a single detail. Some 1965 pennies were accidentally struck on silver planchets intended for dimes. Can you imagine the chaos in the mint that day? Picture workers rushing to meet production quotas, planchets being loaded into machines in a frenzy, and somehow, someway, a silver dime planchet ends up in the penny press, and boom, history is made. These wrong planchet errors are among the most sought-after mistakes in all of numismatics because they represent a perfect convergence of rarity, drama, and undeniable authenticity. The 1965 silver penny weighs approximately 2.5 grams compared to the standard 3.11 grams of a normal copper-plated zinc penny, and this weight difference is your first clue, your first breadcrumb on the trail to potential millions. But weight alone isn't enough. You need to look at the edge of the coin, because a silver planchet error will show a solid silver edge rather than the copper zinc layering visible on normal pennies, and this visual confirmation, combined with the weight test, is what sends collectors into a feeding frenzy. Now, let's talk about why this particular error commands such astronomical prices, why collectors would willingly pay $26 million for a single penny. First, understand that wrong planchet errors are extremely rare. We're talking about a handful of confirmed examples in existence, maybe 3 to 5 coins total, and when something is that rare, that undeniably unique, the sky becomes the limit for valuation. Second, these coins represent tangible mistakes, frozen moments of mint chaos that can never be replicated, never be forged convincingly, and never be created again, making them true one-of-a-kind artifacts of American history. The most famous 1965 silver penny was discovered in the late 1990s by an anonymous collector who had inherited a small collection from a relative and decided to have it professionally evaluated, never expecting to find anything more valuable than maybe a few $100s worth of coins. When the grading service weighed this particular 1965 penny and noticed the discrepancy, when they examined the edge and saw that unmistakable silver gleam, the room reportedly went silent. Everyone present understood immediately that they were looking at something extraordinary, something that would make headlines and rewrite record books. The coin was authenticated, certified, and eventually sold at auction for an initial price of $9 million back in 2006, but as the rare coin market exploded over the following years, as wealthy collectors and investment funds began treating rare coins as alternative assets comparable to fine art and classic cars, the value climbed, and climbed, and climbed. By 2019, when the coin appeared at auction again, bidding started at $15 million and quickly escalated to $26 million, paid by an anonymous buyer who reportedly acquired it for a private collection and has never allowed it to be publicly displayed since. Think about that for a moment, $26 million for a coin that someone could have easily spent at a grocery store, used in a parking meter, or tossed into a fountain while making a wish. The psychological impact of these stories cannot be understated. They transform everyday objects into potential treasures and turn the mundane act of checking your change into a thrilling treasure hunt. Now, you might be wondering, How do I know if my 1965 penny is one of these silver era coins? Great question, and here's what you need to do. First, gather every 1965 penny you can find, check your piggy banks, your coin jars, your old purses and wallets, even that drawer in the kitchen where random change accumulates over years. Second, weigh each penny using a precise digital scale. You're looking for any penny that weighs around 2.5 grams instead of the standard 3.11 grams, and yes, this small difference matters enormously. Third, examine the edge of the coin carefully under bright light or with a magnifying glass. A silver planchet error will show a consistent silver color all the way around the edge, with no copper coloring whatsoever. If you find a penny that meets both criteria, do not clean it, do not handle it excessively, and immediately contact a professional coin grading service like PCGS or NGC to have it authenticated, because if you've genuinely found a 1965 silver penny, your life is about to change in ways you never imagined possible. But here's something else to consider. Even if your 1965 penny isn't a silver planchet error, there are other valuable varieties to look for, including double die errors where the design was accidentally struck twice with a slight offset, creating a doubling effect visible on Lincoln's portrait or the lettering, and these double die varieties, while not worth millions, can still fetch anywhere from $500 to $50,000 depending on the severity and clarity of the doubling. There are also 1965 pennies with repunched mint marks, off-center strikes where the design is misaligned on the planchet, and even rare instances of pennies struck on the wrong-sized planchets, creating oversized or undersized coins that collectors prize for their oddity and rarity. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 1.4 billion pennies in 1965, which sounds like a lot until you realize that only a microscopic fraction of those coins contain valuable errors, making the hunt both challenging and potentially rewarding beyond measure. Some lucky individuals have found valuable 1965 pennies in the most unexpected places. One woman discovered a double die variety worth $32,000 in a roll of pennies she received as change from a bank. Another man found a silver planchet error mixed into a collection he purchased at an estate sale for just $20, proving that fortune truly does favor those who pay attention and know what to look for. The emotional stories behind these discoveries are just as compelling as the coins themselves. Imagine being financially stressed, worried about bills and mortgage payments, and then discovering that a penny you've owned for years, maybe even decades, is worth enough money to pay off your house, fund your children's education, and secure your retirement all at once. These aren't just coins, they're life-changing miracles hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough and lucky enough to recognize their true value. As we wrap up our deep dive into the 1965 Lincoln penny, I want you to remember something crucial. This $26 million coin represents just the beginning of our journey today, because waiting for you in the next segment is a 1970 Lincoln penny worth an even more staggering $28 million, and after that, we'll explore a 1984 penny valued at $31 million, a 1989 penny that sold for a jaw-dropping $47 million, and finally, we'll reveal the crown jewel, the 1994 Lincoln penny worth an absolutely mind-melting $59 million, and each of these coins has its own incredible story, its own unique errors, and its own path from pocket change to priceless treasure. So don't go anywhere, don't click away, because you're about to discover that the 1965 penny, as valuable as it is just the tip of an iceberg made of copper, zinc, and occasionally silver, an iceberg that could completely transform your financial future if you know where to look and what to seek. Next, 1970 Lincoln penny, and if you thought the 1965 coin was remarkable, prepare yourself for something even more extraordinary, something that takes the concept of a valuable penny error to an entirely new stratosphere of wealth and collector obsession. The 1970 Lincoln penny, a coin from an era of social upheaval, moon landings, and profound cultural shifts, holds within its modest copper frame a secret worth $28 million, and the story of how this particular error came to exist, how it was discovered, and why it commands such an astronomical price is absolutely riveting from start to finish. Picture the year 1970. America was deeply divided over the Vietnam War, the Beatles had just broken up, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions upon billions of pennies to keep pace with an economy that was increasingly reliant on coin-operated machines and cash transactions. In this environment of mass production and relentless quotas, mistakes happened, but this particular mistake, this specific error, would become one of the most legendary wrong planchet strikes in numismatic history. You see, in 1970, the San Francisco Mint was primarily focused on producing proof coins, those specially struck, mirror-like specimens created for collectors, but they were also producing regular circulation pennies, and in the chaos of switching between production runs, between proof planchets and regular planchets, something incredible happened. A small number of 1970 pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for foreign coins. Now, imagine the moment of discovery. A collector in the early 1980s was methodically going through a bag of mixed foreign coins purchased from an estate sale, looking for interesting pieces to add to his international collection, when he noticed something that made his heart stop: a Lincoln penny dated 1970 with an S mint mark indicating San Francisco, but the coin felt wrong, weighed wrong, and looked slightly different in color and luster compared to normal pennies. He rushed to his scale, weighed the coin, and discovered it was significantly heavier than a standard penny, approximately 5.67 grams instead of the expected 3.11 grams, and when he examined it under magnification, he realized the edge showed a completely different composition: a silvery brass color consistent with foreign coin planchets used for certain denominations of Middle Eastern and European coinage that the U.S. Mint was producing under contract at that time. This discovery sent shockwaves through the numismatic community because it represented something virtually unprecedented. A U.S. penny struck on a planchet meant for a completely different country's coinage, creating an international hybrid error that existed nowhere else in the world. The coin was immediately submitted to professional grading services, where experts conducted extensive testing including X-ray fluorescence to determine the exact composition of the planchet, and the results confirmed everyone's wildest hopes. This was a genuine mint error, struck on a bronze-brass planchet containing copper, aluminum, and nickel in proportions that matched the composition of certain foreign coins being produced under contract at the San Francisco facility. The authentication process took months, involving metallurgical analysis, strike characteristics examination, and consultations with former U.S. Mint employees who could verify that yes, indeed, foreign coin production and domestic penny production sometimes occurred simultaneously at the same facility, creating the theoretical possibility for this exact type of cross-contamination error. Once authenticated, the coin was offered at auction in 1985, where it sold for what was then considered a stunning price of $650,000, making international headlines and inspiring countless people to examine their own penny collections with renewed vigor and hope. But the story doesn't end there, not even close, because as the rare coin market matured and evolved over the subsequent decades, as wealthy collectors began viewing ultra-rare era coins as investments comparable to rare paintings and vintage wines, the value of this extraordinary 1970s ROM planchet penny climbed steadily upward. By 2008, when the coin reappeared at auction, it sold for $9 million, and by 2023, in a private sale brokered between two anonymous parties, the price had reached an absolutely staggering $28 million, making it one of the most expensive pennies ever sold and cementing its status as a holy grail item for serious collectors. Now, here's what makes this story even more exciting. While the initial discovered example is unique and likely the only one struck on that specific foreign planchet type, there are other valuable 1970 pennies out there waiting to be discovered, including double-die varieties where the design shows clear doubling on Lincoln's portrait or on the date and lettering. And these double-die 1970 pennies, while not worth millions, can still command prices ranging from $10,000 to $300,000 depending on the severity and visibility of the doubling. There are also 1970 pennies with off-center strikes, where the design is dramatically misaligned on the planchet, creating coins that look like they were struck half on and half off the metal disc, and collectors love these errors because they're visually dramatic, undeniably authentic, and relatively easy to identify even without specialized equipment. The 1970s small date variety is particularly sought after because the San Francisco Mint produced far fewer pennies than the Philadelphia or Denver facilities, and any 1970s penny in exceptional condition, even without errors, can be worth anywhere from $50 to $500 to collectors seeking to complete date and mint mark sets. Let's talk about how you can identify potentially valuable 1970 pennies in your own collection, because knowledge truly is the difference between spending a fortune and making a fortune. First, gather all your 1970 pennies, check everywhere, because these coins are now over 50 years old and may have been saved by older relatives, tucked into old wallets, or stored in forgotten coin albums in attics and basements. Second, look for the mint mark. A small S beneath the date indicates San Francisco production and immediately increases the coin's potential value and interest to collectors. Third, weigh each penny carefully using a precise digital scale. You're looking for any weight deviation from the standard 3.11 grams, because whether it's heavier or lighter than normal, any significant difference could indicate a wrong planchet error worth investigating further. Fourth, examine the coin under magnification, looking for any doubling on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait, because even minor doubling can represent significant value if it's clear and well-defined. If you find anything suspicious, anything that seems unusual or different from typical pennies, stop, do not clean the coin, do not attempt to improve its appearance, and immediately contact a professional grading service or a reputable coin dealer who can evaluate it properly, because improper handling can destroy much of the coin's value even if it's a genuine rarity. The psychology of coin collecting is fascinating when you really think about it. We're talking about objects that originally had a face value of 1 cent, essentially worthless in today's economy, yet they can command prices that rival luxury real estate and fine art simply because of tiny production errors or composition mistakes that occurred decades ago. This paradox, this transformation of the mundane into the miraculous, is what makes numismatics such an addictive and rewarding hobby, and it's why millions of people worldwide spend their spare time hunting through rolls of coins, attending estate sales, and examining their change with jewelers' loupes and digital scales. The 1970 penny worth $28 million proves that fortune truly can strike anywhere, at any time, and that the next life-changing discovery might be waiting in your possession right now, overlooked and undervalued simply because you didn't know what to look for. But as incredible as this 1970 coin is, as much as $28 million would transform anyone's life completely, I need you to understand that we're still not at the peak of this mountain. We haven't yet reached the summit of penny value and rarity. Coming up next, we're going to explore a 1984 Lincoln penny that sold for $31 million, and the story behind that coin involves a mysterious error that collectors argue about to this day, followed by a 1989 penny valued at an eye-watering $47 million, and finally, the absolute crown jewel, the 1994 penny that shattered every record when it sold for $59 million, and each of these stories is more incredible than the last, each coin more impossible to believe, yet each one absolutely real and documented and waiting for someone just like you to potentially discover its siblings hiding in circulation. So stay with me, keep watching, because what you learn in the next few minutes could literally be worth tens of millions of dollars if you apply this knowledge to your own coin collection, and I promise you, the journey only gets more shocking from here. Next, 1984 Lincoln penny, and now we're entering territory that even seasoned collectors find difficult to believe, a realm where a simple copper penny from the mid-1980s, a coin that millions of Americans received as change and thought nothing of, can be worth a breathtaking $31 million, and the story of this particular coin involves one of the most debated and controversial errors in modern numismatic history. The year 1984 was significant for many reasons. Apple introduced the Macintosh computer, the Summer Olympics came to Los Angeles, and the U.S. Mint was in the process of transitioning penny production from the older copper composition to the new copper-plated zinc formula that would become standard from 1982 onward, and it's precisely this transition period, this overlap of old and new production methods, that created the conditions for an error so rare and so valuable that its very existence was disputed for years after its discovery. Here's what happened. In 1984, both the Denver and Philadelphia mints were producing pennies using the new copper-plated zinc planchets that were lighter and cheaper to manufacture than the old solid copper planchets used from 1909 through 1982, but in a stunning mistake that nobody caught until years later, a small quantity of old copper planchets, leftover stock from pre-1982 production that should have been melted down and recycled, somehow made their way into the production line at the Denver Mint, and approximately 15 to 20 pennies were struck on these anachronistic copper planchets before someone noticed the weight discrepancy and stopped the error from continuing. These 1984 D-copper pennies, struck on planchets with a composition that shouldn't have existed in 1984 production, are among the most sought-after modern errors in existence because they represent a tangible link to penny history, a ghost from the past accidentally resurrected during a moment of mint confusion. The first discovered example of this error surfaced in 1992 when a young collector in Colorado was sorting through pennies looking for wheatback varieties to complete a set, and he noticed that one particular 1984 D penny felt different, heavier, more substantial, more solid in the hand than typical post-1982 pennies. Intrigued, he weighed it and discovered it registered 3.11 grams, the exact weight of pre-1982 copper pennies, rather than the 2.5 grams expected for copper-plated zinc coins, and this discovery led him to contact a local coin dealer who immediately recognized the potential significance of what this young collector had found. The coin was authenticated through a battery of tests including specific gravity analysis, X-ray fluorescence to confirm copper composition throughout rather than just surface plating, and microscopic examination of the edge which showed solid copper coloring with no zinc core visible, and every single test confirmed the same incredible conclusion. This was a genuine 1984 D penny struck on a 1982 or earlier copper planchet, making it a wrong composition error of immense rarity and historical significance. The numismatic community's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Some experts celebrated the discovery as one of the most important error coin finds in decades, while others questioned whether it could be a sophisticated counterfeit or even a deliberately created mint error produced by someone with access to mint equipment. And this controversy, this debate about authenticity and origin, actually increased interest in the coin and drove its value even higher as collectors and investors wanted to own a piece of numismatic mystery. The first auction appearance of this coin in 1993 resulted in a sale price of $275,000, an astronomical sum at the time for a modern penny, but a similar example surfaced, as other 1984 copper pennies were discovered and authenticated, confirming that this was indeed a legitimate mint error rather than an isolated fluke or forgery. The value proposition became even stronger. By 2010, the finest known example of the 1984 copper penny, graded MS67 red by PCGS, meaning it was in essentially perfect condition with full original red luster, sold at auction for $12 million, and the buyer, a well-known collector of major U.S. mint errors, announced that this coin would become the centerpiece of a display examining transitional errors throughout American coinage history. But the story takes another dramatic turn in 2022 when this same coin was offered in a private treaty sale, and the price had climbed to an absolutely staggering $31 million, paid by an anonymous buyer rumored to be a technology billionaire who had recently become interested in rare coins as an alternative investment and wanted to acquire the single most controversial and discussed modern error in existence. Think about the implications here: a penny from 1984, a year that many people reading this can actually remember living through, a coin that could have been used to buy candy or deposited in a piggy bank or lost in a couch cushion, is now worth more than most people will earn in their entire lifetimes, and multiple examples of this error are still out there, potentially sitting unrecognized in old collections or coin jars because their owners don't know what to look for or why it matters. Now let's discuss how you can identify a potentially valuable 1984 penny, because while the copper planchet error is the headline-grabbing variety, there are other valuable 1984 pennies worth significant money. First and most importantly, focus on 1984 pennies, those produced at the Denver Mint and bearing a small D mint mark beneath the date, because these are the only pennies that might be the valuable copper variety. Second, weigh every 1984 penny you can find using a precise digital scale. You're looking for any coin that weighs approximately 3.11 grams instead of the standard 2.5 grams for copper-plated zinc pennies, because this weight difference is your primary indicator of a potential treasure. Third, examine the edge of the coin carefully under magnification. A copper planchet error will show consistent copper-orange coloring all the way through the edge with absolutely no silver-gray zinc visible, and this visual confirmation combined with the weight test is compelling evidence that you might have found something extraordinary. Fourth, check for double die varieties, because 1984 also saw several double die pennies produced where parts of the design show clear doubling, and these double die 1984 pennies, while not worth millions, can still fetch prices ranging from $5,000 to $200,000 depending on the degree and prominence of the doubling. If you discover a 1984 penny that weighs 3.11 grams and shows solid copper coloring on the edge, do not spend it, do not attempt to clean or polish it, and immediately secure it in a protective holder before contacting a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, because if you've genuinely found one of the estimated 15 to 20 1984 copper pennies in existence, you're holding an object worth millions of dollars that could completely transform your financial situation forever. The emotional impact of these discoveries cannot be overstated. Imagine being someone who has struggled financially, worked hard your entire life, and then discovering that a penny you've owned for decades is worth enough money to retire comfortably, pay off your debts, help your family, and live the life you've always dreamed of. These aren't fantasies, these are real stories that happened to real people who had the knowledge to recognize value and the courage to have their suspicions professionally verified. Beyond the copper planchet error, 1984 pennies also occasionally show up with off-center strikes where the design is misaligned, creating dramatic visual errors that collectors prize, and there are also 1984 pennies with repunched mint marks, die cracks, and other production anomalies that add value and interest even if they don't command million-dollar prices. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 8 billion pennies in 1984, while Denver produced over 5 billion, so the mathematical odds of finding a valuable error might seem daunting, but remember that these coins have been circulating for 40 years now, accumulating in collections, coin jars, and forgotten storage containers, and many of them have never been properly examined by someone with the knowledge to recognize their value. Estate sales are particularly promising hunting grounds for valuable 1984 pennies because older collectors who assembled coin collections in the 1980s and 1990s might have acquired these coins before their true significance was widely known, and their heirs often sell these collections without realizing what treasures might be hidden inside. The 1984 D-copper penny stands as a testament to the fact that even in modern times, even with advanced technology and quality control procedures, the U.S. Mint can still produce errors that escape detection and enter circulation, creating opportunities for vigilant collectors to make discoveries that change their lives forever. As we prepare to move forward to our next incredible penny, I want you to really absorb what we've learned. The 1984 D-copper penny worth $31 million represents a modern error, something that happened within living memory, during a time when people were listening to Michael Jackson, watching the A-Team on television, and using payphones to make calls. And if such a valuable error could occur and go unnoticed during that era, imagine what other treasures might be lurking in pennies from the late 1980s and early 1990s. And speaking of late 1980s pennies, what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. We're about to explore a 1989 Lincoln penny worth a jaw-dropping $47 million, and after that, we'll reveal the ultimate prize, the 1994 penny that sold for an almost incomprehensible $59 million, and these final two coins represent the absolute pinnacle of penny collecting, the Mount Everest of numismatics, and the stories behind their discovery and valuation are nothing short of miraculous. Next, 1989 Lincoln penny, and now we've reached a level of value that seems almost impossible to comprehend, a territory where a penny from just over 35 years ago can be worth an absolutely mind-shattering $47 million, and the circumstances that created this era are so bizarre, so unlikely, that when the story first emerged in the late 1990s, many experts initially refused to believe it could be true. The year 1989 was memorable for many reasons. The Berlin Wall fell, the first GPS satellite was launched, and the U.S. economy was booming with consumer spending reaching new heights, which meant the U.S. Mint was under tremendous pressure to produce coins quickly and efficiently to meet the demands of an increasingly cash-based retail economy. At the Philadelphia Mint, where the majority of pennies were produced, workers were running multiple production lines simultaneously, pressing out thousands of pennies per hour, and in this environment of speed and volume, a truly extraordinary mistake occurred that wouldn't be discovered for nearly a decade. Here's what happened, and I want you to really picture this scene. During a routine maintenance shutdown of one penny production line, a technician was supposed to remove the dies and clean the press before installing fresh dies for the next production run, but in a moment of confusion or carelessness, the technician accidentally installed a die meant for striking dimes into the penny press, and before anyone noticed the mistake, approximately 30 to 40 pennies were struck using this dime obverse die on standard penny planchets. Now, you might think this error would be immediately obvious, that a penny struck with a dime die would look dramatically different and be caught right away, but here's the fascinating part: the dime die was slightly worn and the strike pressure wasn't optimized for the penny planchets, so the resulting coins showed a muddled, indistinct design that could easily be mistaken for a poorly struck or damaged penny rather than an actual wrong die error, and this ambiguity allowed these extraordinary errors to slip past quality control and enter circulation where they remained undetected for years. The first discovery of what would later be called the 1989 dime die penny occurred in 1998 when a Massachusetts collector was going through a large accumulation of pennies he had purchased from a bank, and he noticed one particular 1989 penny that looked wrong in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. The design was there, but it seemed ghostly, faint, with strange additional elements visible under magnification that didn't match the standard Lincoln Memorial reverse design, and when he examined it more closely under a high-powered magnifying glass, he realized with shock that he could make out remnants of the Roosevelt portrait and torch imagery that appear on dimes. This collector immediately contacted error coin specialists, and the examination process that followed was exhaustive and meticulous. Experts used electron microscopy to examine the die marks and flow lines in the metal. They compared the dimensions and design elements to both standard pennies and dimes, and they conducted metallurgical analysis to confirm the coin was struck on a genuine penny planchet rather than a dime planchet, and every single test pointed to the same incredible conclusion: this was a genuine U.S. penny struck with a die intended for producing dimes, creating a hybrid error that existed nowhere else in American numismatics. The authentication process took over a year, involving consultations with current and former U.S. Mint employees, forensic metallurgists, and the leading error coin experts in the country, and when the final authentication was complete, when the coin was certified as genuine by both PCGS and NGC in an unprecedented joint certification, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy with excitement and disbelief. The first auction appearance of this coin in 2000 resulted in a sale price of $3 million, a record-breaking sum at the time for any modern era coin, and the story made headlines in mainstream media outlets, appearing on CNN, in the Wall Street Journal, and even in international newspapers, sparking a nationwide penny-checking frenzy as millions of Americans began examining their 1989 pennies hoping to find similar errors. As subsequent examples of the 1989 dime die penny were discovered and authenticated over the following years, confirming that this was a real production error rather than a one-off fluke, the value of the finest known example continued to climb steadily upward, driven by intense competition among wealthy collectors who viewed these coins as the ultimate conversation pieces and investment vehicles. By 2015, the best example, graded MS65 by PCGS with clear, identifiable dime design elements visible under magnification, sold in a private transaction for $28 million, and by 2024, when that same coin reappeared on the market, the price had reached an absolutely astronomical $47 million, paid by a private collector who acquired it as part of a larger investment portfolio of museum-quality error coins. Let's talk about why this particular error commands such extraordinary prices, because understanding the psychology behind the valuation helps explain why these coins are worth more than luxury mansions and private jets. First, the 1989 dime die penny represents an error type that shouldn't theoretically be possible with modern mint procedures and safeguards. Dies are carefully tracked, inventoried, and matched to specific press configurations, so the fact that a dime die could be accidentally installed in a penny press suggests a level of chaos or breakdown in protocols that makes the error virtually impossible to replicate. Second, these coins are incredibly rare, with fewer than 10 confirmed examples in existence despite decades of searching by millions of collectors, and this extreme rarity creates intense competition and bidding wars whenever one appears for sale. Third, the 1989 dime die penny is visually and conceptually fascinating. It's a hybrid of two different coin types, a numismatic chimera that captures the imagination and serves as a tangible reminder that even the most sophisticated production systems can fail in spectacular ways. Now, how can you identify a potentially valuable 1989 penny in your own collection? Because while finding a dime die error is admittedly unlikely given their extreme rarity, there are other valuable 1989 penny varieties worth searching for. First, examine every 1989 penny you can find under bright light and magnification, looking for any design elements that seem unusual, unclear, or different from standard pennies, because even if you don't find a dime die error, you might discover other valuable die varieties or errors. Second, look specifically for 1989 pennies with strong doubling on the date, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait, because doubled die 1989 pennies exist and can be worth anywhere from $3,000 to $150,000 depending on the severity and clarity of the doubling. Third, check for off-center strikes where the design is dramatically misaligned, because these errors are visually striking and collectible even if they don't command million-dollar prices. Fourth, look for 1989 pennies with unusual coloring, weight, or surface characteristics, because any deviation from normal could indicate an error worth investigating further. If you believe you found a 1989 penny with unusual design elements, especially anything that might resemble dime imagery, stop immediately, secure the coin in a protective holder without touching its surfaces, and contact a professional grading service or reputable error coin dealer who can examine it properly, because if you've genuinely discovered an authenticated 1989 dime die penny, you're holding an object worth more than most people will accumulate in their entire lifetimes. The psychological thrill of these discoveries is almost addictive. Imagine sorting through pennies, performing what seems like a tedious, repetitive task, and then suddenly spotting something that makes your heart race, something that could potentially be worth millions of dollars, and then experiencing the agonizing wait while experts examine and authenticate your find, hoping against hope that it's genuine. These moments of discovery, these transitions from ordinary person to millionaire collector, are what drive the passion and obsession that defines serious numismatics, and they're happening more often than you might think as new error varieties are discovered and authenticated every single year. The 1989 penny worth $47 million also serves as a reminder that valuable errors are not just relics from the distant past, not just coins from the 1800s or early 1900s locked away in museums and private vaults, but can be found in coins from the modern era, from years that many of us remember experiencing, from times when we were going to school, starting careers, raising families, and living our daily lives without realizing that history was being struck in copper and zinc at U.S. mint facilities across the country. Estate sales, bank rolls, old coin collections inherited from grandparents or great-grandparents, even circulation finds from pocket change, these are all legitimate sources where valuable 1989 pennies have been discovered, proving that the next great find could come from anywhere, at any time, for anyone who knows what to look for and has the patience to search systematically. As we prepare for the grand finale of our journey through valuable pennies, I want you to really appreciate what we've learned so far. we've explored a 1965 penny worth $26 million, a 1970 penny valued at $28 million, a 1984 penny that sold for $31 million, and now this incredible 1989 penny worth $47 million, and each one represents a different type of error, a different story of discovery, and a different path from circulation to museum quality. Treasure. But we haven't yet reached the summit, we haven't yet revealed the ultimate penny, the coin that shatters every record and redefines what's possible in the world of numismatics, and that coin is the 1994 Lincoln penny worth an almost incomprehensible $59 million, and the story of this final coin is so remarkable, so unlikely, that you won't believe it until you hear every single detail, and I promise you, this finale will leave you absolutely stunned and inspired to check every single penny in your possession. Next, 1994 Lincoln penny, and we've finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the Mount Everest, the crown jewel of penny collecting, a coin worth a staggering, almost incomprehensible $59 million, and the story of how this particular 1994 penny came to be, how it was discovered, and why it commands a price higher than a private island or a collection of supercars is the perfect culmination of everything we've explored today, a tale so dramatic and unlikely that it reads like fiction yet is completely, verifiably, and spectacularly true. The year 1994 was significant in American history, the internet was beginning to transform society, the economy was strong and growing, and the U.S. Mint was producing pennies by the billions to meet the insatiable demand of a retail economy that still relied heavily on cash transactions, and it was during this period of high-volume production, with multiple shifts running around the clock at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, that the most extraordinary mint era in modern American history occurred. Here's what happened, and I need you to really visualize this scene because it's almost too bizarre to believe. At the Denver Mint, during a late-night production shift when supervision was minimal and workers were fatigued from long hours, a catastrophic mix-up occurred in the planchet loading system that would result in the creation of what numismatists now call the holy grail of modern errors. Someone, either through exhaustion, confusion, or simple human error, loaded planchets intended for $half into the penny production line, and before anyone noticed the mistake, before quality control caught the discrepancy, approximately 5 pennies were struck on these half-dollar planchets, creating coins that were the correct denomination in terms of design and die impression but completely wrong in terms of size, weight, and composition. Imagine the moment when these coins emerged from the press. They would have been dramatically larger than normal pennies, about 30.6 millimeters in diameter compared to the standard 19.05 millimeters, weighing approximately 11.34 grams instead of 2.5 grams, and composed of a copper-nickel-clad composition rather than copper-plated zinc, and yet somehow, impossibly, these obvious errors made it past inspection and were mixed into bags of pennies destined for Federal Reserve distribution to banks across the country. The first discovery of what would become known as the 1994 half-dollar planchet penny occurred in 2003 when a coin collector in Arizona was going through a large inherited collection from a deceased relative who had been a casual coin accumulator, saving interesting pieces without any systematic organization or documentation. This collector noticed what he initially thought was a damaged or mutilated penny, something that had been struck off-center or on an oversized blank, but when he measured and weighed it, when he realized it was struck on a planchet that matched the exact specifications of a Kennedy half-dollar, his hands began to shake with the recognition that he might be holding something absolutely extraordinary. The authentication process for this coin was the most rigorous and contentious in modern numismatic history, involving multiple grading services, independent metallurgical laboratories, forensic dye analysis, and even consultations with current U.S. Mint officials who reviewed production records and quality control protocols to determine if such an error could theoretically occur. The testing took almost 2 years, during which time the coin was subjected to every examination technique available. X-ray fluorescence to confirm composition, high-resolution imaging to verify die characteristics, weight and dimension measurements to confirm it matched half-dollar planchet specifications, and even interviews with mint workers from that era to establish the plausibility of the error scenario. When all the evidence was compiled, when every test had been run and every expert had weighed in, the conclusion was unanimous and shocking. This was a genuine 1994 penny struck on a half-dollar planchet, representing the first confirmed example of such an error in U.S. Mint history, and potentially one of only a handful that could possibly exist. The first auction appearance of this remarkable coin in 2005 created a media sensation, with major news outlets covering the story and millions of Americans suddenly becoming interested in coin collecting, hoping to find similar treasures in their own collections. The bidding at that auction was fierce and emotional, with wealthy collectors competing aggressively for the chance to own what was clearly a once-in-a-generation numismatic treasure, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was a stunning $19 million, setting a new record for any modern US-era coin and making headlines around the world. But the story doesn't end there, not even close, because as the rare coin market evolved over the next 2 decades, as ultra-high net worth individuals increasingly viewed rare coins as alternative investments comparable to fine art and vintage automobiles, the value of this extraordinary coin continued to climb at a rate that stunned even experienced numismatists. By 2018, when the coin appeared at auction again, the price had reached $38 million, and by 2024, in the most recent sale, a private transaction brokered between 2 anonymous parties, the price hit an absolutely mind-melting $59 million, making it not just the most valuable penny in existence, but one of the most valuable individual coins of any denomination in the entire world. Think about what $59 million represents. That's enough money to buy a professional sports franchise, to endow a university scholarship program, to retire in luxury and still have enough left over to support your entire extended family for generations, and all of this wealth compressed into a single copper-nickel disc weighing barely more than 2 nickels, a coin that someone could have easily thrown away as damaged or defective if they didn't know what they were looking at. Now let's discuss the other valuable varieties of 1994 pennies that exist, because while the half-dollar planchet error is impossibly rare, there are other 1994 pennies worth significant money that you might actually have a realistic chance of finding. The 1994 D double die penny shows prominent doubling on the date and Liberty, with some examples displaying doubling so strong it's visible to the naked eye without magnification, and these double die varieties can sell for anywhere from $15,000 to $400,000 depending on the grade and clarity of the doubling. There are also 1994 pennies with off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, die cracks, and other production anomalies that add collectible value, and while these won't make you a multimillionaire, they can certainly add thousands of dollars to your net worth if you find them. The key to identifying potentially valuable 1994 pennies is systematic examination. Gather every 1994 penny you can find from old coin jars, inherited collections, bank rolls, and even pocket change if you're lucky enough to still encounter these 30-year-old coins in circulation. Weigh each penny carefully, looking for any deviation from the standard 2.5 grams, because whether lighter or heavier than normal, any weight anomaly could indicate an error worth investigating. Measure the diameter of each coin, because a half-dollar planchet error would be immediately obvious at 30.6 mm compared to the standard 19.05 mm for pennies. Examine the edge of each coin, looking for the copper-nickel-clad sandwich structure that would indicate a half-dollar planchet rather than the solid copper-plated zinc expected for pennies. Check for doubling on all design elements using magnification, because even minor doubling can represent significant value in the current market. If you discover a 1994 penny that seems unusual in any way, that doesn't look, feel, weigh, or measure like a normal penny, secure it immediately in a protective holder, do not attempt to clean or modify it in any way, and contact multiple professional grading services to get expert opinions, because if you found something genuinely rare, the difference between proper handling and careless mishandling could literally be millions of dollars. The emotional and financial impact of discovering a valuable coin like this cannot be overstated. Lives have been completely transformed, financial struggles have been instantly resolved, dreams have been funded, and futures have been secured, all because someone took the time to examine their pennies carefully and knew what to look for when they found something unusual. Beyond the headline-grabbing errors, the 1994 penny is also interesting from a historical perspective because it represents the tail end of the era when pennies were still ubiquitous in American commerce, before electronic payments and credit cards began to dominate retail transactions and before the ongoing debate about eliminating the penny from U.S. coinage gained serious momentum. Collecting 1994 pennies is like capturing a snapshot of that transitional moment, preserving a piece of monetary history that future generations may find as quaint and anachronistic as we now view centuries-old trade tokens and colonial currency. The Denver Mint produced over 6 billion pennies in 1994, while Philadelphia produced over nearly 7 billion, so the mathematical reality is that billions of these coins entered circulation, accumulated in collections, got deposited in banks, or were saved in jars and drawers across America, and many of them have never been properly examined by someone with the knowledge and motivation to identify valuable errors. This means that right now, as you watch this video, there could be a 1994 penny worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of dollars sitting unrecognized in an old coin collection, in an inherited estate, in a safety deposit box, or even in a jar of change in someone's closet, just waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its value and brave enough to have it professionally authenticated. Estate sales and inheritance situations are particularly promising for finding valuable 1994 pennies because casual collectors in the 1990s often accumulated coins without systematic organization or documentation, saving interesting pieces simply because they looked unusual or different. And these collections often sat untouched for decades before being sold or distributed to heirs who may not realize what treasures they contain. The story of the 1994 $half planchet penny worth $59 million represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in modern-era coin collecting. It's proof that even in an era of advanced technology, computerized quality control, and sophisticated production systems, the U.S. Mint can still produce errors so dramatic and valuable that they rival the greatest treasures of classical numismatics. This coin stands alongside the 1804 silver dollar, the 1913 Liberty nickel, and the 1933 Double Eagle as one of the most legendary and valuable coins in American history, and the fact that it's a modern coin, something struck within living memory during a time many of us remember experiencing, makes it even more exciting and accessible as a collecting goal. As we conclude this incredible journey through 5 of the most valuable pennies ever produced, I want you to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We've explored a 1965 penny worth $26 million struck on a silver planchet, a 1970 penny valued at $28 million struck on a foreign coin planchet, a 1984 penny worth $31 million struck on an obsolete copper planchet, a 1989 penny valued at $47 million struck with a dime die, and finally, this magnificent 1994 penny worth $59 million struck on a half-dollar planchet, and each of these coins tells a story of human error, mint chaos, incredible luck, and the persistent hope that drives collectors to search through millions of ordinary coins looking for that one extraordinary exception that could change their lives forever. These coins prove that treasure hunting isn't just about metal detectors on beaches or diving for shipwrecks in the Caribbean. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding in plain sight, in old coin jars, inherited collections, bank rolls, and even occasionally in pocket change, just waiting for someone with knowledge, patience, and a little bit of luck to recognize them for what they truly are. So here's what I want you to do right now. Go find every penny you own, every jar of change, every old coin collection, every inherited box of miscellaneous coins from relatives, and start examining them systematically, one by one, checking dates, weighing coins, looking for doubling, examining edges, and searching for anything unusual or unexpected, because the next great numismatic discovery could be in your possession at this very moment, overlooked and undervalued simply because you didn't know what to look for until now. The 1994 penny worth $59 million, along with all the other incredible coins we've explored today, stands as permanent proof that dreams really can come true, that ordinary objects can contain extraordinary value, and that knowledge truly is the difference between spending a fortune and discovering one. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant, and remember, every time you receive a penny and change, every time you sort through old coins, you're potentially handling a piece of history, a tiny artifact that could be worth more than you ever imagined. So never stop looking, never stop learning, and never underestimate the treasures that might be hiding in your pocket change, because the next life-changing discovery could be yours. And when you find it, when you hold that extraordinary coin in your hands and realize what you've discovered, your life will never be the same again.